YouTube. Welcome, Chef Katie May here and Chef Ramses Bravo. We are live again. We just had a little blooper. So if you are just joining us, we are making savory dishes today for the holidays. We've got Halloween right around the corner, but also all of the other holidays that are coming. And I want to get you started with, in that mindset like we were just talking about, of how to create great flavor without succumbing to the temptations of the standard American diet, or more specifically, the processed sugar, oil, salt. We can really enjoy the flavor and feel good in our bodies sticking with our whole food plant-based diet, garden fresh foods. So we're going to talk about how to develop that flavor, the richness, right? Do you want to say anything to that extent?
Holidays are not a time for starvation, for deprivation. It's not a time for, lacking. The way I always approach my holidays, family gatherings, birthdays, yada, 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 where you're thinking, it's, maybe you're not thinking it, but your mind automatically goes, hey, it's a party. It's time to,
kick up the richness a little bit.
Have some rich food. You can still achieve all of that in a SOS-free form. And hopefully we're going to show you a couple of different recipes that will show you the process. We're not showing these recipes to show you the recipes. We're showing you the recipes to illustrate the point that we're trying to get across.
Yeah, lots of flavor. We're going generally in the holiday time. Well, with Halloween right around the corner, we want sweetness, right? We think sugar and everything, but over the course of the holiday season, that richness generally comes from more savoriness. And the savory flavor, that savory taste, we can actually pinpoint to something called umami. We have umami taste buds, and this is what gives us that savoriness. So I want to talk to you about that today. And Ramses is actually really great at developing savory flavor, but he doesn't think of it in terms of umami. It's a very new term to the culinary world. So we're going to just talk about savoriness, umami, all of this great stuff here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my course as well, because that is how you can go deeper into learning the science and specific methods deeper than we're doing today to learn how to create that savoriness.
Before you go on the science, what are you going to be for Halloween? People need to know these things.
What are you going to be?
I want to be a chef.
Oh, well, there we go. Both of us are chefs.
No, you can't copy me.
Oh.
Someone else.
Let us know in the comments if you guys are dressing up for Halloween, if you're doing anything, what you're going to be. So we have 4 dishes we're making today. So we're going to kind of go a little, just kind of get it going. So if you have any questions at any time, let us know in the comments. I'll address, try to get everyone. Just put a big question, all caps, in the front so I can see it really easily. Okay, so I'll let you get started. We're making, I'm going to get you guys the recipes too, in case you haven't gotten on our email list and got them that way.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that while you start.
So I have sort of like an entree kind of thing. Recipes in the one dish. You can certainly use these as 3 separate things. I just like sort of bringing it all together so that an entree has like all the components, but you can pick them apart and use them as you need. Let's see. First thing I want to do is I'll show you. I have a pot here with some water with a basket insert, and so this is the beginning for the potato corn cakes. So I'm going to take some potatoes, and I'm just going to, so these were peeled in half, and so I'm now going to take each half and quarter it. So I'm taking one potato, peeling it, and cutting it into 8 pieces. And that's because these potatoes were on the larger size. You can certainly do just halves or quarters, depending on the size of the potatoes you're using. Although if you're only going to have them because they're so small, I will tell you that it's more of a pain to peel a tiny little potato. I don't like potato skins, and that's just a personal preference. So I always peel my potatoes. There's something about potato skins that doesn't agree with my taste buds. They sort of get itchy for me. I don't know if any of you out there have that. You can certainly let us know in the comments. That way I know if I'm just the only weird one.
Potato skins make your
Yeah, they just give me a...
It's like pecans for some people.
Yeah, they just give me this funny sort of thing, and I don't like. So I always peel them. But if you are a potato skin person, by all means, continue to do that. Totally okay. That's just a personal thing. And I've tried the different potato skins, and they all do the same for me. So I always peel potatoes. Okay, so I'm gonna put a lid on this. I'm gonna take this to the stove. And basically you want to steam these until they're fork tender. What that means is that you'll take a fork. See if I can show you. If I put one of these potatoes in there, it's hard for the fork to go in. Fork tender means that the fork is actually able to go in to the potato once it's fully cooked without any resistance, and then also come out without any resistance in there at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the stove for now. Let me see.
All right.
And get those steaming. And then in the meantime, we are going to, or I'm going to show you the other ingredients that go in with the potato, and I'll talk about them individually so you know. We were having a conversation before we started about ingredients, in particular unnecessary ingredients. So for me, there's never any ingredient that shouldn't be there. If an ingredient doesn't add something to the dish, there's no use for it. And I'll explain this a little bit more. So let's see. For the cakes, what I have here is I have a couple of ears of corn. And we're like winding down on our corn season, but it's still, you know, very much alive. So I took a couple of ears of corn, took the husks, removed the husk, took the silk out, and then I roasted them in the oven like you see here. 350 degrees, just until I get a few sort of roasted looking markings on them. Probably took about 15-ish minutes. It really depends on how big they are, how many of them you have in there. So actually I brought these from work. We had an entire, you know, tray like this large in there. And so that would take a little bit longer to cook than if you just did the two of them in your oven. I really just go by the look of it. Now, you can certainly use raw corn, so just shuck it and then, you know, shave the kernels off. And you figure, well, it's going to, you know, get all mixed in and then it's going to get baked in the oven. So, you know, why cook it twice, kind of a thing. The other conversation we were having before we got started is the concentration of flavors. And Katie was telling me all about the savory conversion. She has a nutritional background where I don't. To me, it's all about flavor. I always go. My focus is always about making it taste good. I don't really care what the, you know, molecules and the particular elements and the vitamins and all of that. To me, it has to stay good. It has to taste good. If it does, then great. If it doesn't, the nutritional information doesn't make up for that. So when I cook a corn, an ear of corn, whether I'm roasting it, steaming it, or some other way on a fire pit, my train of thought is always to remove the water. evaporate the water. So whether it's on the pan, on the stove, on the grill, in the oven, I want to evaporate the water out of that item, in this case corn, so that I concentrate the flavor of it. Now Katie is going to tell you about what's inside corn.
When you're concentrating the flavor of corn, he often thinks of corn as sweet. You're concentrating that sweetness, right?
Yeah, you're talking about
We were
the
just talking
protein.
about that. But it's not like mango. You know, corn or banana, you know, it's not high sweetness. There's also protein in it, not just sugar. And that protein is what gives us that umami flavor. So when you're concentrating, which you do so well, by taking out that water, you're concentrating the sweetness and the umami and the savoriness, right? Mm-hmm. So you're bringing out the sugars and developing the proteins. And when you talk about me liking the nutritional piece, in large part it's because that's what helps to motivate me to eat healthier, is knowing the nutrition. But it also helps when you know the nutritional science. It allows us, and you may or may not learn this in culinary school if you were studying, but it does help us to understand why we process things, why we prepare things in a certain way. And if you're trained in culinary school and you don't learn the science, you know enough that you don't need to know the science. But as a home cook, depending on your interest and personality, that may or may not help you develop more flavors. But it's also key because that the molecule we're talking about for savoriness is actually can be neurotoxic, like very damaging to your brain and to the rest of your body if you get too much of it. And that's where learning the science is helpful for knowing when you're getting good amounts and when you're getting too much.
Are you saying like in the raw state or the cooked state?
Yeah, so that's the question, right? And in the raw state, no, you can't get too much in the raw state. And in cooked, if we are cooking our food at home, you're not going to develop too much. But when you start commercializing the food and you're doing over processing, which, for the most part, home cooks never do, then you don't have to worry about it. But when we buy processed food, if you're buying fake vegan meats and things like that, then it already comes in super processed and dangerous.
Okay. I was going to say, there's no way I'm eating too many of these in one sitting.
No.
Okay.
But that's the key. So anyway, let's continue.
Okay.
We'll get this going.
So just to summarize that, when you evaporate water, so there's in a raw ear of corn, there's a certain amount of water that comes with it as you pick it from the corn plant. And there's also a certain amount of flavor, whether that be the sweetness and the umami and all of that. When you evaporate, you only evaporate the water out of it, which means that by volume, that's how the flavor concentrates, because there's less of it, but yet there's still the same amount of that flavor. So that's how it concentrates. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Someone has a question. The corn, do you roast it with any water?
No.
No water.
No, because remember, we're trying to evaporate water out of it. We're not trying to put any water into it. So let me just check my potatoes here real quick. So I'm just going to take a knife here. The other advantage to cooking the corn here is so that once it's cooked and I'm shaving the kernels off, the kernels just sort of fall right in. Whereas if it was raw, and if you've ever shaved kernels off of a raw ear of corn, you know that they jump all over the place. So this actually helps for that. And let's see, I'm gonna do...
I saw you once do this. You mentioned doing it in a bundt pan. A bundt cake pan? You put the... Was it you? Someone else?
No, I think
you can put the corn right in the middle of the bundt cake pan, and then it all falls to the side.
Must have been somebody else. Okay. I'm trying to... I didn't do the whole second corn because I'm trying to visually see how much the corn to the potato ratio kind of is. So that's why, if you caught that, I'm only doing like a corn, 1.5 ears of the corn, because I just already know how much potatoes are coming in. All right, so next ingredient, I have here some Cajun spice. Now, you don't have to use Cajun spice. You could certainly use like chimichurri spice, or maybe just some herbs, fresh or dried, some oregano maybe, cumin, coriander, or whatnot. So Cajun spice is not just a one single thing. There is multiple things in here. There's onion, there's garlic, there's cumin, there's coriander, there's paprika, a little bit of chili powder. So I'm trying to imagine how this all comes together, okay? I'm not putting any herbs in here. She actually suggested that we leave out the Cajun spice and put some herbs in there.
That was before I realized all the toppings that were involved.
Yeah, so that would have been a bad idea because the dressing in the salad has a lot of herbs, and particularly parsley. So parsley is going to be a big part of this. So it wouldn't make sense to use herbs and then more herbs and then more herbs. You want a little bit of contrast. That's why I like the Cajun spice here. Okay. And also my other ingredient that I'm going to use, as once I start putting this together, you'll see how and why this comes together. The idea here is to take a starch, in this case the potatoes, along with some other starch in the corn, and make a patty. So we mentioned the holiday kind of thing where you think, well, if I am plant-based or vegan or whatnot, everybody else gets to have this rich food, fun food, and then they're gonna be like, well, here's a bowl of rice and veggies. So you don't have to, settle for that. We're gonna make some potato corn cakes or patties, or if you want to call them burgers, go ahead. The idea is that they're gonna be the sort of fun patty food that you can take your knife and fork to it, and there's gonna be a wonderful sauce and some salad that's going to go over the top. It's going to look really nice, colorful, flavorful. I think you already sent the recipes, and there was a photo of it. The photo that she sent.
No recipe, no photo.
No photo. Okay. You'll see when it's all done. It's like sort of very tantalizing in the eyes. Now, in order for that patty to come together, there needs to be the right ratio of starch to moisture, okay? Once I start putting this together, you'll see, I'll do the thing with the hand. And so in order to help me just get to that perfect ratio, I like using brown rice flour so that I get the right consistency. We're looking for a Play-Doh consistency to this, so that when you go form your patties, your cakes, they hold. So when you put them in the oven, they don't sort of crumble, they don't fall apart, they don't sort of ooze out, okay? You want the right consistency to this.
Potatoes are not done yet.
Not done yet, okay. How about we make the sauce? Because that doesn't have to wait much at all. And then that'll be ready to go. So, let me just make sure I'm plugged in here. Here we go. And I will have Katie talk, or help me talk about the umami-ness of this. So we're gonna make so this is a lemon parsley dressing, okay? So there are a lot of parsley that's coming in here. So you'll see how putting herb in the potato cakes wouldn't make sense because I'm doing a heavy parsley load in with it. Okay. So
we're adding, let me show you guys a recipe. Let's see. Okay. So this is what we're making now. The corn fennel salad is going to be next with the dressing right here. Mm-hmm. We've got lemon juice, parsley, cashews, and clove. Good. Sorry, garlic clove. So our lemon juice is straight up tanginess. There's no umami there. No. Our parsley has a little bit, but this is a raw dressing. We're not cooking any of this. So this actually doesn't have a ton of umami savoriness. Our cashews have some and our parsley, but if you were to roast these cashews, like I have some pecans, just finished roasting. Those are going to go over our Brussels sprout salad. If you were to roast the nuts, that starts to break down the protein and develop more of the umami. So this salad, the dressing isn't high umami, but our bases.
The reason for that is, if you have, just like I was talking about the herbs, if you have herb in the potato cakes, and you have herbs in the dressing, and then you have herbs in the salad,
Right.
it's just too much.
Too much.
In order to appreciate the umami in a dish, you have to have something else that gives it contrast.
Exactly.
Okay? So, excuse me. If it's umami for the potato thing, and then if this was a mushroom sort of dressing, you're just doing umami on top of umami on top of umami, so there's nothing to bounce off when you're eating it and your taste buds just get overwhelmed. They're like, whoa, too much. Your body automatically goes, too much. I'm gonna sort of close down or shut off the taste buds so the brain doesn't get overwhelmed, and that's it. But if you have something, in this case, that's going to be sort of that sour tone, suddenly that umami just sort of flourishes because it's like, oh, there we go. I have something to bounce it off of. So, parsley goes in. The reason I'm sort of ripping it, and you're thinking, well, isn't that just going to blend in the Vitamix? What happens is you got this long strands of herbs. Sometimes they can get wound up at the bottom of the blade, and therefore they don't blend very well. Quarter-ish cup, probably a little much, quarter-ish cup of cashews, and all right. Within this dressing, there is that perfect, how do we put flavors together? Each ingredient here, if you were just to eat it by itself, you would get overwhelmed rather quickly. So you could only drink so much lemon juice, probably a teaspoon, 2 maybe, before you go, pucker face kind of thing. You could only chew on so many garlic cloves before your mouth would be on fire because it's just too much. It's too spicy. And you could only chew on so much parsley before that earthiness would be enough.
Yeah.
Now, when you put all of them together, what happens is your brain goes, no, it's garlic, it's spicy. No, it's sour. No, it's earthy. No, it's this nutty. And then it just goes back and forth, and your brain never has a chance to get overwhelmed. Okay, so the flavors just
from an
bounce off.
evolutionary standpoint, that's what we want. We don't want too much of anything. Our bodies are designed to taste all those different things. And if we were to do it all umami, you'd say yuck. But it's from a protective mechanism that we want a balance. We don't want too much of any one of the flavors.
What's that saying?
What?
I forget how it goes. Having too much excess of anything is a bad thing, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like
that's the point. Moderation. Except for moderation doesn't really work either. The cashews were not soaked ahead of time. So when you have a high-powered blender, yep, you don't need to soak the cashews.
Okay. If you were to soak cashews, okay, you would be adding 2 ingredients to the blender, cashews and water. We're talking about chasing the water out of our food. Therefore, if we're adding water, whether it's by pouring it or if it's inside the cashews, we are diluting flavor. So no soaking. Okay.
These are almost done. You want them really soft though, right?
Yeah. Now, The recipe gives you measurements as to what that is, but I always tell people a recipe is really nothing more than a guideline. So, for example, if this particular recipe calls for 5 garlic cloves, which is what I added in there, and then you do it, and your garlic cloves are much bigger, obviously the recipe is not going to be, taste the same. Therefore, every time I make something, I always taste it because you want to make sure. You want to see where the balance of flavor is at. So Katie's going to taste it first. And she's going to decide, is this too sour? Is it too spicy because of the garlic? Is it too...
The garlic is subtle. The tang comes out the most. The parsley.
It's a little heavy on the lemon. It's a little sour. So after I taste it, automatically my mouth does that
tang.
Buttery kind of thing. So in order to fix that, I am going to add a couple of garlic. Okay, I have to balance that out. And maybe I'll even add just a little bit more parsley as well. I can turn this off and
Let it sit.
yeah.
So someone's asking what kitchen we're in. We're in a mutual friend and patient from True North Health Center, lives in Santa Rosa, and is letting us use her kitchen.
We're crashing the party over here. Okay. This one. Okay, one more time. Taste.
What did you add now?
I added, excuse me, I added 2 more cloves of garlic and a sprig of parsley.
Much better. Much better. Definitely still some lemon, but not super strong.
But it doesn't linger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yay.
Yeah. So that's how that happens. You have to taste, because again, your cloves of garlic could have been bigger or smaller than the ones you used last time. The lemon you used might have a higher or lower pH level. There might have been more or less of it because the lemons had less juice. So you always have to taste to make sure you got it just right. Okay, so our sauce is ready. I'm gonna set that off to the side.
While that goes, before you start the cakes, we could start our Brussels sprout salad.
Sure. All right. We need a pot.
Got a pot?
Okay.
So this salad is super quick. Again, this is a great example of what Ramses said earlier. You don't have any ingredients that aren't needed, right? So we have, I think there's 4 or 5 ingredients in this recipe. Brussels sprouts. These are shaved Brussels sprouts. We just put them in the food processor. So they're really thin and they're going to cook up super fast. This gives you the bitterness, also a little bit of umami. So I'm just going to start by putting this on the stove top with just about 1 inch of water on the bottom of the pan. We don't want too much water because that dilutes the flavor. We don't want to have to strain out any extra water. So just a little bit, enough to steam the Brussels sprouts on the bottom of the pan.
And ideally what she's going to do is just get a small amount so that by the time that water evaporates and it's no longer there, her Brussels sprouts are right at the level of tenderness that she's looking for. Okay, so she doesn't want any extra water, again, to dilute flavor. She's just using that water to cook the Brussels sprouts. Once the water has done its job, it has already evaporated out of
You
the
can
pot.
always add more. You can't take it out though. So go on the lesser side if you're wondering how much water to add. And just pay attention.
Let's see, I'm looking at
Questions?
questions.
So we're going to do that over medium heat so it doesn't get too hot. Behind me, the dates.
Dates.
What kind of blender are you using?
Vitamins, specifically a 5200 model, which is, if you ever want to invest in a Vitamix, that'd be the one model I'd recommend. That's the one I have.
Why do you like that model specifically?
Specifically because it has that sort of a turbo feature where you have the dial setting where it starts low and then it gets to the high, but then you can switch it to the really high setting, so that if you want something really, really nice and smooth, that's what you end up getting. So for me, it's sort of like the low-end blenders, and then the Blendtec Ninja kind of thing, and then the Vitamixes, and then the 5200 model. That's how it goes for me.
So I just diced up our dates here. These are adding sweetness. They're going to balance the bitterness of the greens. So I'm going to add these into the pot right now so the sweetness diffuses throughout the salad. Okay? And we'll mix those in so they get kind of all throughout the dish. They're sticky though.
Okay. What?
Oh, no, I want a spoon.
Oh. Her hands were sticky. She's trying to figure out how to get that stickiness out. I am going to now check on the potatoes, which I'm pretty sure. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
I want to make sure I don't leave any burn marks on this. Actually, I'm just going to bring the basket. That way I don't...
Bring it over. Okay. Somehow we got a little fly in the house.
All right, so here's the potatoes out of the basket, and fork tenderness means the fork is going in and out without any resistance going in. Sometimes the fork will go in, but then it'll grab it. The food itself will grab onto the fork, and you'll feel it's like you have to put more force bringing it out than you did going in. So that's what fork tender means. So now, potatoes go in.
Yum. This is the best part.
Yeah, the starch.
I want to take over.
Why don't you tell them about the starch thing when you cook it, and you were mentioning the protein, the specific protein. What's it called?
Oh, the umami. Well, glutamate.
Yeah, that's it.
So, we're cooking. How are you going to mash this up? Just a fork?
With a fork,
We don't
yeah.
have that. Okay. So when you cook your starches, your complex carbohydrates, you're breaking down the complex carbohydrates so that you taste more of the sugar. You taste more sweetness that way. When you have a whole food, you also, in addition to complex carbs, whether it's a starchy vegetable or a grain or a legume, you also have proteins, whole proteins, strings of amino acids. When you cook that protein, you cook that food, you're breaking down the complex carbs and you're breaking down the protein into individual amino acids. When you have broken down components like that, it allows your taste buds to identify those components as a taste. Right? So that's why we like to cook our food, because we can taste more of the sweetness and we can taste more of the protein, which would be the umami specifically. So, yeah. So this, what I'm talking about, there's so much more to know, but the implications is what's really important from a health standpoint, and it doesn't matter as much when we're eating 100% whole food, plant-based. But most of us, unless you're Dr. Goldhammer, because Ramses and I know we are certainly not 100% all the time. There's reasons to understand. There's reasons to understand the flavor science and nutrition, so that you can make better choices when you're out and about, where it matters most, and that may vary from person to person. So I encourage you guys, I'm going to share the link in a little bit to The Magic of Umami. This is my upcoming course. It's a 6-week course, actually 6 modules. We're going to do it in 3 weeks, and it's going to be so much fun. You guys are really going to love it. Okay, so just stay tuned. If you haven't joined that already, I think you should join us.
Okay.
So what do you got?
So now where I'm at is, I've sort of used the fork to mash the potatoes, but it's just sort of crumbly. There is, if I try to, hold it, if I try to shape it, right, Gotta get my other glove in. If I try to shape it now, it won't hold it. It'll just sort of be crumbly. That's why the rice flour comes into the dish. Okay, so this is still hot. So I'm gonna take a little bit of this, and if I go like this, you know, to try to shape the patty, this is what happens. It just sort of crumbles. Okay, if I hold it this way, it gives it a nice patty. But if I try to roll it into a bowl, it just doesn't hold. That's how I know I need a little bit of rice flour to
The Brussels sprouts are looking good. Coming along nicely. They need a few more minutes though.
okay, take a
How's
little
it
bit more.
holding?
Oh, no, a little bit more.
So what if you don't want to do rice flour? What other flours would you recommend? Or could you do even ground flaxseed?
You could. I wouldn't do flaxseed because it has a particular taste. Yeah.
You wouldn't want to do chia seeds.
Nope. No chia seeds. Maybe some gluten-free oats.
Mm-hmm.
Or just oat flour. If you have an issue with gluten, then you make sure that it's gluten-free. Tapioca, maybe?
Yeah. Tapioca bothers me. Seems a little more processed. If you could do an oat flour or just a rice flour, I think that's your best bet.
You could even take rice, brown rice, and stick it in your coffee grinder, and you know, you leave it in there long enough, it will turn into flour. So you don't have to necessarily go out and
What about
specifically.
quinoa flour?
You could do.
It gets kind of gritty. So quinoa flour doesn't grind to a nice powder as easily.
The thing about quinoa is that it's not a starch. Quinoa is a seed, so that's why it doesn't necessarily.
It's not a grain. Botanically, it's a seed.
Okay, so it's holding a little.
Almond flour would be good. Potato flour, you could do potato flour.
Potato flour. You know, you already got potatoes in here.
A couple questions. Let's see. Can you substitute the cashews with white beans?
Yeah.
Or something else?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's sort of the way to do a completely fat-free version of a dressing. Instead of using nuts to give you that creaminess, you can use some white beans to give you that. It doesn't quite come out the same, obviously, but you can do that. I've also used cooked celery root. You know.
Or
Give it a rinse,
steamed cauliflower.
peel it, cook it, and then add it on. So,
Yeah.
So now, as I'm making this, trying to make these into little
Someone
balls.
asks why not cook the potatoes in the microwave versus the steaming them.
I'll let you answer that one.
Well, the energy of the food completely changes in the microwave. There's been research done that Dr. Greger has research showing that the antioxidants and some of the nutrients don't change and might even increase depending on the different cooking methods, and microwaves aren't bad for that reason. But I strongly disagree. There's a lot of shift in the energy of the food when you microwave it, to the point where I tried microwaving a potato once and then ate it whole, that was the intention, to eat it whole as a baked potato, and it was so bad I just threw it out. So if you're reheating things in the microwave, that's completely different than trying to cook from scratch.
For me, microwaves, the only reason I use them is to reheat something.
Okay.
But I always tell people, look, if you decide you want to microwave your potatoes in order to make this dish happen, and that's going to keep you away from the drive-thru, then yes, by all means, microwave it and make it happen. I would almost say I don't have the science behind it, but a microwave potato cake is better than anything drive-through kind of thing. So.
Agreed.
All right, so now I think I have enough of that rice flour. So as she was talking, I was doing kind of one of these, and the ball just holds a little bit better. I'm going to add just a touch bit more. Now I know that since I've been adding more and more rice flour, it's sort of the other opposite effect as we were talking about evaporating water out of a dish. I am increasing the volume of starch in here, therefore there isn't enough Cajun flavor to carry that. So I have to add more.
And what I'm doing here, I'm just crumbling up our toasted pecans. I had roasted these pecans at 375 in the little air fryer for 5 minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And I'm crumbling them by hand, but you could do this with a knife or the bottom of a jar.
Okay. I am ready here, and I have.
That's right.
Sometimes you end up with things, you know, if you want to give this sort of a plant-based thing a try, and you already have a bunch of things, and you're like, well, what the heck do I do with this now? So, you know, ice cream scoop is a good way to portion out your your potato corn cakes.
It's also good for nice cream. I had some great cacao nice cream yesterday to get you that recipe. So questions. Cassava flour and arrowroot flour. Have you used those?
I'm not familiar with cassava flour, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Arrowroot I've used as a thickener, like in a sauce kind of a thing.
What about frozen corn instead of fresh corn?
Yeah, that you can always do. One of the cool things about this recipe is that you can do it year-round, because once the fresh corn season's done, then you can always switch to the frozen corn.
What about freezing these patties? Have you done that?
You can freeze anything, you know, stick her in the freezer and she will freeze, okay?
So freezing
the question
is
how
much water. If it's not as much water, they generally freeze better. Things will freeze better.
Right. So it's more of it, does it thaw out well? That's really the question. I would say no on these. Only because the water, there's enough water content in here. Potatoes are mostly water, actually.
Yeah.
So with that much water in there, as it freezes and it expands, it just sort of breaks down the whole thing. Long story short, the texture will change in a negative way, and so will the flavor. So I would not necessarily freeze these.
What if you cooked them first? Would that be?
You can cook them first and evaporate that water out, and then you can freeze. I wouldn't cook them all the way. Maybe like bake them halfway and then freeze them. Okay, and then take them out as you need them. Finish them off in the oven.
So have you showed them how big these patties are?
They're pretty big.
They're like 3-4 inches wide. I don't want to pick them up, but they're pretty big patties. I was imagining something smaller, but.
Well,
these are nice size.
You can make this any size you want. The reason I'm making them big is because this is a entree, sort of portion look to it. You can certainly make them little. Your ice cream scooper can be little and be an appetizer kind of thing. But if you're gonna call this an entree and show up with this tiny little little cakes, and we're like, where I didn't get my money's worth.
Fabian, earlier you mentioned how much fun asked if I was having fun visiting everyone, and I definitely am. Down in Santa Rosa, and I've gotten to see more people visiting here than I did when I lived here. I mean, more often, so it's definitely good. And I'm going to be going down to LA tomorrow, actually, Central California, and down to LA to visit family there. So lots of travels.
Okay.
We got to cut up this apple.
All right.
Oh, you want to do your magic oven? Is that going to go in and out? Wait a minute.
We'll set these off to the side. Why don't you do the apple thing? I'll set this to the side.
So this is the last piece. Actually, do we have any more lemon juice? You probably have some in the fridge. We see.
Okay.
Any. So our apple is going to add a little more sweetness to our salad because I only added 5 dates to the Brussels sprouts. 1 lemon will be good.
1.
So I have 5 dates and 1 apple for sweetness. The dates are in the salad already on the stovetop, And I could add the apples with the dates, but then they'd get really warm and start to get soggy. So I like adding the apple at the end so you have a crunch and a cold texture. Well, if your apple's cold or room temperature, it gives you that contrast from the hot salad.
Maybe I'll bring this over so people can see what it looks like so far.
Yes.
So again, she just steamed this slightly. You can see that the Brussels sprouts look like they've been cooked, but they're not. But they're not, breaking down quite yet. So now she's adding the apples.
And we'll add a little lemon juice. We're good to go.
Okay. And so what she's doing in this Brussels sprout thing is the same thing I was doing in the dressing, the lemon parsley dressing. You are balancing the flavors. So she's doing the savory, the umami there on the Brussels sprouts, balancing that out with the sweetness of the dates, along with the tartness, the sourness of the lemon. So it's, if you got each flavor in the right amount, so that it,
And then we're going to top it off with toasted pecans.
So there's a little nuttiness and richness to that.
More umami in that too.
So again, it's all about, the right balance of the flavors, whether it's a Brussels sprouts and pecan dish, or a lemon parsley dressing, or in the salad that I'm about to do. It's sort of like we are a one-trick pony, ponies, kind of the one-trick ponies. You just want to balance the flavor. That's all.
That's all, folks.
Okay. So while she's doing that, I'm going to go into the making of the salad.
I think we should put these patties in the oven. We can put them in that one.
Yeah, let's put them in that one.
We're going to put these in our little air fryer across the room.
The Breville. Let's see.
What's your temp?
350, please. Checking to see if there's any questions.
Time.
And that says cheese graters are used these days to grate carrots. That is correct. So there's always a use for a lot of things. I don't know. Anything you see
I'll
there?
get them. Give us a question.
Okay.
You guys never shared what you were wearing for Halloween. Well, I didn't see any answers to that.
You said you were going to be
This
nothing.
morning.
So you're like the invisible woman kind of thing?
Oh no. Superwoman. We'll see. Maybe I'll come up with an outfit. I'll be with my nieces and nephews, so
Okay. So
we're gonna grate our fennel.
I'm going to
Now-
take my Japanese mandolin here. And I'm going to remove the comb attachment. They call it a comb because it's sort of like this comb shape. You do your hair. Don't do that.
Someone,
What?
Angela says, I'm gonna pull a Chef AJ. I think these two would make an adorable couple. Someone else says, I think they did date at one time. Colleen, you'd be right.
I used to drive her crazy. And so she's like, forget this guy.
Yeah, right.
Truth be told, she traded me for a younger guy. But we won't get into that.
Oh boy.
I
I love him still.
I still love her too. She we had a really good time
We
together.
did.
Yeah.
We had a Halloween together.
Did we?
Yeah. went to
We
a
must have. We
Halloween
were together for
party,
two years. Oh, that's right. We did the
yeah. What was
pirate.
it? Yeah, we were pirates.
Pirate. Yeah. I still have pictures
Okay.
somewhere. Okay, so now I'm adjusting my fennel, and I shave a couple of these, and just to see if I got the right thickness. Going on? Oh, yeah. Camera. And so when I decide, yeah, I got just the right thickness. What you need?
Bowls. Where are the bowls?
Oh, bowls are here, like serving bowls.
Yeah, for the salad.
Oh, there.
That's good.
So I'm gonna do some shaved fennel. I'm also going to shave some red onion in here.
The salad, this Brussels sprout salad is best if it's served right away. So you want it warm. I like it warm with the cold apples on top. But as it cools, you know, the Brussels sprouts become more soggy, a little more soggy, less appealing. So make this right before you're going to serve. We'll add our toasted pecans here. What's this bowl for?
That had something was in, oh, the potatoes. The potatoes were in here. So we'll set it up to the side.
The pecans are like the best part of this salad. So good.
So I had like one small bowl of fennel here. I think I want to do all of it. Well, actually, yeah, of course I'm going to do all of it. We need some leftovers. Why not? I was thinking, you know, that's going to be way too much for, you know, once I put the plate together, the dish. But literally, I only need a little bit, so I might as well, you know, make extra.
We'll use it. So what's the flavor of this salad? Would you have it, ever eat it on its own? I'm not a big fennel fan.
You're not a big fennel fan? Someone named this for me. They named it a sweet and sour fennel salad. And I'll talk about that in just a second.
Yeah, someone's eat, no guard. If you don't have a guard, you're going to risk your fingers.
No need.
I've never cut my finger on the guard while using it, only while transferring it. So, yes, if you have a guard or cut gloves, that would be great to use while you're using a mandolin.
I just want to see her face.
She saw.
See that? This is why we're no longer a couple. I used to drive her crazy.
We didn't spend enough time in the kitchen.
That's the one regret I do have. We didn't cook together enough.
Yeah.
But now, of course, we're not together anymore, and we're like doing shows.
How it goes.
Okay.
So what else would you do? Some people want to make this for Thanksgiving. What other dishes? The Cajun would not be a traditional Thanksgiving dish, but I think it would be so amazing taste-wise. And these are perfect for, instead of a turkey leg, have a little potato corn cake, right?
What is Thanksgiving? To me, it's a time to, oh, sorry. To me, it's a time to eat good food. So as long as you have good food, whatever it is, you're good to go.
Yeah. And gratitude.
Yeah, of course.
Gratitude for the good food and the good company.
All right. So we're talking about putting this together and the use of just the right ingredients, nothing unnecessary. So the fennel here is giving me this sort of licorice, almost candy in a way flavor. The onion here is providing some spiciness to this. Next is, and you can see this by itself. You're like, oh, you want to have a big bowl of that? You're like, no. You know, I see some like whitish green and some red. It looks dry. It's uninteresting. There's not enough going in there. If you tell me what it is, great. Don't give me any to eat because I'm not interested. Fair enough. To it, I'm going to add a tart flavor in the form of cherry tomatoes. And so with each ingredient, there's a different color, a different texture, a different flavor coming in, okay? So now the cherry tomatoes in there, so now the bright red pops, And to me, cherry tomatoes have this, I call it a bursty texture, which when you bite on them, there's a burst of that sweet tart juice in there that you get. Still not enough for me to say, I'm like interested. Oh, what's in there? Okay, that's good. You want any? No, not really. Now I'm going to add some sweetness to it in the form of corn. Truth be told, this salad does better if you're using yellow corn because the yellow pops, whereas if you use the white corn, it sort of blends in with the fennel. Okay, but the flavor-wise, it still works. So now that gets in there, and now in comes our earthy, herbal flavors in a bright green color.
What if someone doesn't like parsley? What other herbs would you do?
Oh, basil. You could do basil
And
in
you
here.
could do the same in the dressing too, if you didn't want to do parsley in the dressing.
Correct. You could do
Mint.
mint would be good, as well as some tarragon. Cilantro. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people don't like cilantro because they
I
think
love
it tastes like
cilantro.
soap. That's a genetic thing. You can certainly do a combination of, a little bit of parsley, a little bit of cilantro, a little bit of basil. You're not limited to the one thing. Okay. So that goes in there, and suddenly you see that this has a lot more color to it. You have this sort of bursty textures in the cherry tomatoes with the chewiness of the corn, the leafiness of the parsley. You have the sweet, the tart, the spicy. Okay, we're also going to add a sour component here, which we don't have. So every time you add an ingredient, it has to bring something different to the party. Okay, if I wanted to add some, for example, some red bell peppers to this, I already have red. I already have that bursty sort of texture, and flavor-wise, it's got that sort of sweetness. We already got sweet with the corn, so a red bell pepper would bring nothing to this party. Therefore, it's an unnecessary ingredient. Okay, we don't have anything sour in here, and so that's why the rice vinegar works very well in here.
Another vinegar would work as well, or a lemon, or lemon or lime.
Lime, apple cider. I've done this with apple cider vinegar. The one thing I wouldn't do, it would be a balsamic vinegar, a regular dark balsamic. And the reason for that, it would give this a sort of
We're in the color.
a dirty look because of the darkness. If you did a white balsamic, absolutely, that would be good. Okay. And so once again, it's a matter of balancing the flavors. I talked about being a one-trick pony. We have balancing the flavors of the dressing, balancing the flavors of the salad, and the potato cakes. So once again, you want enough spice with enough sweet, with enough of that candy licorice thing, with enough of the earthiness. Perfect. Okay. Want to try?
No, I want to pour.
Want to work? Yeah.
You got to get each piece.
You got a little bit of everything. In order to judge it, you got to get a little bit of everything. That way, you can taste all of it. Yeah? Okay.
The fennel is not too strong because of all the other pieces. It's delicious. The only thing I would do is, I'm not a parsley fan, so I cut the parsley really small so you don't get too big of pieces. Or swap some out with another herb, but it's delicious. So,
Okay.
how's our cakes?
Cakes.
Cakes, we got cakes over here
You
too.
want to give it a look and see what they look like? So they should have this nice. Now I can see them here.
Yeah, they're not.
Quite ready.
I think I should turn up the heat. Can I turn it up?
Maybe 400. So the cake should have this sort of a nice red color, golden brown. You want that Cajun spice to come through, get nice and toasty, and give that nice sort of deep color. So, I had a few here that I'm going to.
Good plate. Use this.
Use this.
No.
Why?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I like this one. Okay. Now, as far as plates go, I always encourage people to use nice white plates, white china. If you have the turkeys or the American flags, the Statue of Liberties, or the whatever design on your plates, the food doesn't show well. It's sort of like trying to show a painting on top of a painting. Okay, you need a white canvas in order for those colors to pop.
Right.
Otherwise, the plate and the food are sort of battling each other.
Who's hungry? Who's hungry?
Good.
This is gonna be so good.
Let's see if I can do that real quick. A little bit of that action. Yeah.
They're wondering about the fennel.
Uh-huh.
Do we have more to garnish? The different pieces of the fennel, since people don't use it as often. Can you talk about
Yeah.
the
So
different pieces?
the fennel has this bulb part at the bottom, which is what I was going to show it. So it's got this sort of bulb at the bottom, and from there, all these sort of stems come up. They call them ribs. It's almost like a celery rib kind of thing. Within those ribs, there's also these like what they call them, fennel tops. You can use those sort of like an herb. It has the look of like dill. That's the way it looks. Tastes completely different. And so you can use those fennel tops as sort of like an herb garnish kind of a thing. If I would have had the whole fennel, I would have brought it and show you so you could see the different pieces. But it's essentially just this nice nice sort of very delicate, very mellow tasting quote unquote herb. You can always save the tops and use them as herb kind of thing, and then the ribs, the stalks, I always keep those for the use of making vegetable broth. Okay, and then the bulb itself we use in the cooking of it, slicing for the salads or the soups or whatnot. So, there you go. Let me see. It looks better.
Let me actually bring these down. Ooh, where'd you drop the camera? There you go.
Nope. Right there.
Beautiful, isn't it?
This guy, it's not off to the side. There we go.
It's great colors for the holidays too. The greens and reds.
Yeah, so just, again, yummy, filling, rich food, This one has the richness in the dressing because of the cashews, and the fillingness of the potato and the corn, and all those colors. And again, we go here, this would be more of a fall.
Not quite as appealing looking when it sits, because the green, when you first take it out, when it's done, the green is a bright, pretty green color. After it sits for some time, it kind of goes
The acidity of the lemons start to
oxidize the greens.
Yeah.
But I tell you, this is a delicious salad, so it may not look like chef's bravos, but between the two, it's going to be quite a feast.
Again, with this whole quote-unquote entree thing, you can use that dressing for a different sort of salad. If you're more of a mixed greens, person. Lemon parsley dressing works great. If you want to use those potato cakes in a smaller size and just as an appetizer, just sort of like a one bite kind of a thing, certainly do that by themselves. The salad itself could just be the salad, with a completely different side dish to go with it. Okay, you could serve your soup and then that's your salad and then something else comes later. Okay, and let me see. I want to make one point.
The Brussels sprouts, I just added, there was probably half a cup of water to the bottom of the pan with about a pound of Brussels sprouts. And it depends on your lid, keeping your lid on because you don't want the water to evaporate. You want just enough to steam the Brussels sprouts without having to strain out any extra water. So you'll have to kind of just estimate, start with less, and you can always add more, but you can't take that water out. Everyone says how beautiful the dishes are. Love the presentation. Thank you guys. What are you looking for?
For a pepper grinder.
Pepper grinder?
Yeah.
Oh, these are all the peppers. Look at this.
Oh.
This household has more spices than I've ever seen in a home.
She has a lot of spices.
This is all just peppers, hot, mostly hot.
Ground
There's
pepper.
just plain pepper.
Okay. So just another example of, what if I add this? Would it make it better or worse? So if I do a little bit of, which I'm going to do, a little sprinkle of pepper. I don't have anything that's pepper in here. Okay, so just a touch of sprinkled black pepper on here actually does bring something to the party, because now you see all those specks, and if you see them from far away, you're like, I'm not sure what that is, but there's specks in there. Seasoning, which means
Flavor.
whoever put this together is trying to get some flavor in here. Okay, and now between the Katie did mention that once we completed the dressing, that it was still a little lemony. Okay, so now we're doing a lemon pepper within within the dish, a lemon pepper dynamic within the dish itself. We're not trying to accentuate, we're not calling it a lemon pepper or anything, but that does come to play as you do the sauce, and the ground pepper is in there, and then all the other ingredients come in. So there's all these layers that just sort of go on top of each other, which makes it look really nice.
Yes.
And tastes
Doesn't
really
it?
nice.
Everyone says how great it looks. They want to join us for dinner. I wish we could have you for dinner. I wish we could do dinner parties.
No, not now. Not right now.
Well, one day we'll have dinner party. Next spring, we'll have you over. So I just put a link to the Magic of Umami course. If you guys want to go deeper into the art and the science of flavor and specifically umami, but we're going to talk about all the flavors. I'm going to hone in on that on umami, because the processed umami, I mentioned earlier, getting too much, it's dangerous when we're getting it highly processed. And if you're familiar with the term MSG, MSG is highly processed umami. And so that shows up in lots of different ways in the standard American food supply under so many different names, but it also shows up in some of our very common plant-based foods that are a little bit processed. So we're going to talk all about that. Join me for that class. It's only $39 for a lifetime access, and you will not be sorry. There's a 30-day refund period, so you can refund it if you're not happy with it, but I promise you what you're going to be learning is not taught anywhere else. I mean, you can't find this on the internet. I search high and low for the research I'm going to be sharing with you guys. So definitely join us, and we're going to enjoy this dish and our salad here.
If there's any final questions, that'd be the time.
Yep.
Other than that, what does it say? The last one?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Katie May, and enjoy Chef Bravo. I appreciate you that
Put your
we're willing
thumbs
to
up,
do
people.
this. Yeah, give us a thumbs up on, not here in the comments, but on the YouTube page. That really helps. And share this video with other people. If you'd love this recipe. Chef Bravo's all his lessons, little tidbits throughout the show. We're gonna be back next week for another episode of Delicious Living. And until then, I hope you guys have a delicious weekend. Enjoy the recipes.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.